Tragedy in Essex. A 19-year-old woman killed in dog attack. Man arrested. A 19-year-old woman has tragically lost her life following a dog attack at a residential property in Essex, prompting police to arrest a 37-year-old man on suspicion of being in charge of a dangerously out of control animal. Now we take a deeper look and break down this entire story on the AI podcast.
We often think of our homes as our ultimate safe havens. I mean, when you cross the threshold and lock your front door behind you, there's this fundamental unspoken expectation that the unpredictable dangers of the outside world are just going to stay outside.
Right. It's supposed to be your sanctuary.
Exactly. But what happens when the danger is already inside? Welcome back. In this deep dive, we are examining a deeply distressing pair of recent events that completely shatter that expectation of safety.
It really does.
And I want to be upfront with you from the start. Today, we are looking at the tragic deaths of a 19-year-old woman and a baby girl in two separate fatal dog attacks.
It is incredibly sobering material. We are talking about staggering losses of life happening within the actual confines of residential properties.
Yeah.
This entirely reframes how we view the spaces where we are supposed to feel the most secure. It forces us to look at the domestic environment not just as a sanctuary, but as a place where, unfortunately, lethal dynamics can unfold behind closed doors.
It's terrifying to think about. Our mission for this session is to look closely at the facts we have from these two separate incidents to understand how authorities are responding to these tragedies.
Right, because the response has been significant.
Very significant. We are going to examine the specific legal language being used by the police, the immediate triage actions taken at the scenes, and what it all means for the broader, urgent conversation around responsible ownership.
Which is a conversation we absolutely need to have right now.
We do. These events have prompted very serious police investigations and arrests, and they demand a careful, empathetic, and highly analytical look. So what does this all mean? Let's begin by looking at the first incident.
Okay, so this first one took place in Essex, specifically at a home in Leaden Roding, which is near Dunmow. And the timeline here is just stark.
Yeah, walk us through it.
Emergency services were called to the residential property at approximately 10:45 p.m. on a Friday night.
God, a Friday night. I mean, a time you associate with unwinding, with family, with the start of the weekend.
Exactly.
And instead, emergency responders are walking into an absolute nightmare. When officers arrived at the property, they discovered a 19-year-old woman with severe injuries.
Just horrific.
And despite the massive efforts of the emergency medical personnel, she was tragically pronounced dead right there at the scene.
The authorities stated that they believed the dog present at the property was responsible for the fatal attack. But what immediately stands out in the official reporting is the subsequent action taken by the police.
The arrest, right?
Yes. They arrested a 37-year-old man from the Dunmow area. And it is the specific charge, or rather the suspicion under which he was arrested, that requires a very close look.
Right, because he wasn't arrested for owning a dangerous dog. The specific phrasing used by the police is that he was arrested on suspicion of being in charge of a dangerously out-of-control animal.
Yes, that exact phrasing.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that phrasing feels incredibly deliberate. It separates the concept of permanent ownership from the concept of immediate responsibility.
It really draws a line in the sand.
Think of it like a vehicle, you know? If you borrow someone's truck, it doesn't matter whose name is on the title or who pays the insurance premiums.
Right.
If you are sitting in the driver's seat and you drive it recklessly into a storefront, you are the one responsible for how that vehicle is operating in that exact moment.
Yeah.
By using the phrase "in charge of," how does this shift the legal focus from the dog itself, or the abstract idea of ownership, to human accountability at the exact moment the incident occurred?
What's crucial to understand here is that the law is attempting to isolate the variable of human control. The phrasing, "in charge of a dangerously out-of-control animal," indicates that the authorities view the dog in that specific moment almost as an extension of the person who is supposed to be managing it.
Wow. An extension of the person.
Exactly. It removes the easy defense of simply claiming the animal belongs to someone else. The legal standard being applied focuses entirely on proximity, authority, and the failure to prevent harm.
So it's about who was in the room.
Yes. If you are the human in the room and you have assumed any level of authority over that animal, the burden of safety falls squarely on your shoulders. The authorities are essentially saying that a dog's behavior in a domestic setting is a direct reflection of the human management in that exact environment.
Which explains why the man remains in police custody while detectives work to determine the full circumstances. They aren't just looking at the dog, they are looking at the entire environment and the human decisions that led up to 10:45 p.m. on that Friday.
Right. They have to reconstruct the chain of events to see where that management actually failed.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the operational side of the investigation. The authorities noted that the animal has been seized as part of the ongoing inquiry.
Seized. That's a very specific word.
It is a formal legal term. It means the dog is now considered crucial evidence in a potential criminal case. It elevates the animal from a domestic pet to a central forensic artifact.
So it's not just animal control coming to take a dangerous nuisance away. It's a piece of a much larger puzzle.
Precisely. The official reports explicitly mention that experienced detectives are leading the investigation. This isn't a routine call handled by patrol officers.
Right.
Detectives are meticulously piecing together the circumstances. They have to establish a timeline, understand the animal's history, the nature of the supervision, and the exact sequence of events that led to the fatal injuries.
Building a criminal case.
Yes, making this a top priority for the force. The seizure of the animal allows them to conduct forensic examinations. They will look at bite marks, DNA evidence, and behavioral assessments to prove or disprove the suspicion that the arrested man failed in his legal duty to remain in control.
They are basically treating the scene with the rigor of a homicide investigation.
They absolutely are.
It highlights just how seriously the state views these incidents. It's treated with deep gravity, focusing intently on human negligence or failure. And the urgency of this conversation is amplified by the fact that this wasn't an isolated weekend tragedy.
No, it wasn't.
Just a day prior, on Thursday, another devastating incident occurred.
The tight clustering of these events adds a chilling layer to the broader context. Moving from Essex to Redcar, we are confronted with another fatal attack within a 24-hour window.
Yeah. In the Redcar incident, the victim was a baby girl who died following a dog bite. Just take a moment to process that. A baby.
It is heartbreaking. The vulnerability there is absolute.
The official reports note that during this incident, a woman also sustained injuries to her arm. That detail strongly implies there was a physical struggle, an adult desperately trying to intervene and stop the attack on the infant.
Following this incident, a 45-year-old man was arrested. We see the immediate move toward human accountability again, and arrests being made in the direct aftermath of the tragedy.
So authorities are consistent in applying that standard of immediate human responsibility.
Very consistent, yes.
But wait, I have to push back on the sequence of events here, specifically regarding how the animals were handled, because I'm looking at these two timelines, and I don't understand the discrepancy.
Okay, what do you mean?
In Essex, the police seize the animal. They preserve it as the primary piece of evidence for their investigation, like we just discussed. But in Redcar, Cleveland police confirmed 2 dogs were destroyed almost immediately.
Right.
Why the massive leap in protocol? Isn't a dog in these situations? Why wouldn't they use tranquilizers or secure the animals? Why skip straight to destroying the very evidence you need to build a case against the 45-year-old man they just arrested? It seems counterintuitive to a criminal investigation.
I see your point, but you are highlighting the brutal reality of triage in emergency response. When law enforcement arrives at a residential address, their protocols must pivot instantly based on the active threat level. First responders operate on a strict hierarchy of priorities, and preserving evidence is always secondary to preserving human life. In a scenario where an animal is already secured or the immediate violence has ceased before police arrive, officers can prioritize evidence gathering.
Which allows for the seizure we saw in Essex. Because the threat is neutralized, so they have the luxury of treating the animal as a forensic puzzle piece.
But if the authorities arrive and the situation is highly dynamic, the protocol shifts entirely. If there is an ongoing danger to the victims, to the bystanders, or to the emergency medical personnel trying to reach, that baby girl police cannot wait.
Right. Paramedics can't do their jobs if they're being attacked.
Exactly. Paramedics cannot enter a scene to provide life-saving care if there is an active threat in the room. The priority moves from preserving evidence to immediate threat neutralization. The fact that Cleveland police confirmed 2 dogs were destroyed suggests a scene of intense chaos and danger.
Oh, God.
Lethal force was likely deemed the only rapid way to make the environment safe enough for paramedics and officers to operate.
It paints a terrifying picture of those first few minutes when emergency services arrive. They are forced to make split-second, irreversible decisions. And the fact that there were 2 dogs involved in the red car incident adds a whole different layer of complexity and danger for the responding officers.
It really does.
They are managing multiple moving threats while trying to facilitate emergency medical care.
And, the destruction of the dogs also fundamentally changes the trajectory of the investigation. Detectives in Red Car no longer have the living animals to assess behaviorally.
Right, the evidence is gone.
They must rely much more heavily on witness statements, the physical environment of the home, and the medical reports of the injuries sustained to the baby girl and the adult woman. It makes the job of proving human negligence different, relying entirely on the context of the home rather than the ongoing behavior of the animal.
And the fact that both of these events happened within 24 hours of each other, Thursday in Red Car, Friday in Essex, creates a compounding effect. Authorities aren't just dealing with isolated tragedies in separate jurisdictions.
No, they are facing a sudden, highly visible crisis of public safety regarding animals in the home. It dominates the public consciousness.
Which brings us to the aftermath. The ripple effect that these events have on the people living right next door. The violence stops, the arrests are made, but the psychological impact on the community lingers.
Deeply. We can see this acknowledged in the statements from the police spokesperson, Stuart Hooper, regarding the Essex case. He stepped forward to express condolences and deep concern over the shocking event, but he specifically acknowledged that this tragedy would deeply affect the local community.
Yeah, Hooper confirmed that officers would maintain a visible presence in the area. The stated goals were to offer reassurance to the public and to gather any relevant information for the investigation.
Right.
But here's the core of the issue. Both cases highlight renewed concerns about dog safety and responsible ownership. But if the underlying fear in the community is about what is happening inside people's private homes, how people are raising, training, or failing to control their dogs behind closed doors, how does a visible police presence on the street actually address those concerns?
It's a fair question.
If the danger is a dog inside a living room, a patrol car on the sidewalk doesn't physically stop a bite. It feels like a gesture rather than a solution.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's important to look at the mechanics of what a visible police presence actually achieves beyond just making people feel emotionally settled.
Okay.
Analytically, a police presence on the street is a highly visible, undeniable signal of state authority. It communicates that the concept of responsible ownership is not just a polite social guideline. It is a strict legal mandate.
Oh, I see.
By keeping officers in the area, by visibly conducting neighborhood inquiries, and by publicly stating that experienced detectives are investigating, the authorities are sending a clear warning. They are demonstrating that failing to control an animal carries the very real threat of severe criminal charges.
It shifts the conversation from a private domestic issue to a matter of public law enforcement. They're reminding everyone that the boundary between a domestic pet and a deadly weapon is something the law takes incredibly seriously.
And the state is actively monitoring that boundary.
Yeah.
The visible presence acts as a powerful deterrent. It forces every dog owner or anyone who is in charge of an animal in that community to immediately reevaluate their own household practices. When residents see police actively investigating a home where a lack of control led to a fatality, it brings the abstract concept of legal liability right to their own front doors.
It makes it real.
It prompts questions about fence heights, leash habits, and how visitors are managed.
You walk your dog past a police officer standing outside a home where a 19-year-old just lost her life. And you are forced to confront the reality of what that animal is capable of if you fail in your duty to control it. It strips away the illusion that a dog is just a harmless part of the furniture.
The authorities are making it clear that they will not view these events simply as tragic accidents or acts of nature. By arresting a 37-year-old man and a 45-year-old man in the immediate aftermaths, the law is asserting that there is a chain of human causality.
A chain of decisions that led to the tragedy.
Exactly. The state is determined to find the point where human responsibility failed, the exact moment a person allowed an animal to become dangerously out of control. It is a rigorous standard of accountability.
It completely reshapes how we understand the presence of animals in our lives. As we synthesize everything we've uncovered in this deep dive, we are left looking at 2 devastating incidents. One in Essex, one in Red Car. 2 lives lost. A 19-year-old woman and a baby girl.
Just devastating.
Through the specific phrasing of the arrest, particularly the charge of being in charge of a dangerously out-of-control animal, we see a very uncompromising message from the authorities. The ultimate liability for dog safety does not rest on the animal. It rests heavily and legally on human shoulders.
And the contrast in the immediate police response, seizing a dog for forensic investigation in one instance and destroying 2 dogs to neutralize an active threat in another, demonstrates the volatile, highly dangerous reality that first responders face when that human responsibility breaks down.
Right.
It illustrates how quickly a domestic setting can require lethal triage.
And this matters deeply to you, the listener. Because even if you don't own a dog, even if you never plan to, you live in communities, neighborhoods, and apartment buildings where these animals are present every single day.
We all do.
Understanding these strict lines of legal responsibility changes how we view our environments. It changes how we interpret the social contract we have with our neighbors. When you bring an animal into a dense residential area, you are signing an invisible contract with everyone around you.
That's exactly what it is.
When the police maintain a visible presence to investigate a shattered community, they are enforcing that contract. They are reminding all of us that safety is a shared, legally binding obligation.
It forces us to confront the fact that the line between a beloved family pet and a legally recognized danger is entirely dependent on the vigilance, capability, and responsibility of the human holding the leash. The law does not differentiate based on affection. It differentiates based on control.
We've spent this time breaking down the legal language, the brutal triage of police protocols, and the tragic timelines of these events. But as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, drawing on the mechanisms of human control we've just discussed.
Okay.
If the criminal standard focuses so heavily on the exact moment a human is found to be in charge of a dangerously out-of-control animal, what is the exact threshold where an animal shifts from being a typical household pet to a recognized legal danger? And in the wake of these heartbreaking tragedies, are we as a society paying nearly enough attention to the subtle behavioral warnings before that tragic threshold is crossed?
That is the crucial question we all have to consider.
Thank you for joining us for this difficult but necessary deep dive. We will be back with more analysis soon.
Okay, one question for you. What legal responsibilities does a dog owner have under UK law when it comes to controlling potentially dangerous animals? And how might this case involving the arrest in Dunmore impact future enforcement? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.